You have met this person before. Not the same face, not the same name, but you knew them inside an hour. Something in you leaned forward before you chose to. Something recognized a shape and moved toward it. Months later, you were standing inside an argument you had already lived. Same words, different person, another year, another city. You called it bad luck. You called it your type. You made a joke of it at dinner and let it pass. But it did not pass. It followed you into the new job. It waited for you in the new friendship. It sat down at the table of the family you built to be nothing like the one you came from. And every single time, you were certain the cause was them. There is a woman who changes everything and arrives at the same place. New city, new circle, new love. The same weather closes around her by the second season. She is not careless. She is often the most careful person in the room. She reads people well. She has done the reading, the therapy, the long walks at night. And still the same figure appears at the edge of her life, wearing a different coat. Carl Jung had a name for whatever does this. He did not call it fate. He did not call it poor taste in people. He called it something that lives inside you and acts without asking. Something with a will of its own. Something that does not only color your inner life, but arranges the people standing around you. Older ages had a blunter word for it. They said the woman was possessed. They said something had entered her and was steering. And when Jung studied the phenomenon closely, he did not laugh at that word. He said the old word was crude, but it was not wrong. Because whatever this is, it does not stay inside your head. It reaches out. It selects. It casts the parts. It builds the same room around you, again and again, out of whatever people happen to be nearby, and you will never see it while you are looking at the people. Begin with the part that is hardest to say out loud. Your relationships have a plot, not a theme, not a tendency. A plot with the same turning points, in the same order, at roughly the same distance from the beginning. There is the early stretch when this one is different. There is the moment something small goes wrong and lands far harder than it should. There is the slow drift into a familiar role. And there is an ending you could have described in advance, because you have described it before. You know this already. You have simply never laid the stories side by side. Almost nobody does. You examine each relationship on its own. You give it its own explanation. He was cold. She was jealous. That workplace was poisonous. That group of friends had one difficult woman in it. Every explanation is local. Every explanation is about them. And each one may even be accurate. That is exactly what makes this so hard to see. The pattern does not hide by being false. It hides by being spread thin across years and faces, so that no single instance ever looks like a repetition. Jung noticed this in his patients, and it unsettled him. He was not looking at women with poor judgment. He was looking at intelligent, perceptive women whose relational lives kept producing one identical shape. They could read other people beautifully. They could not see the shape. He wrote that a certain kind of psychic content behaves like a living thing with intentions of its own. It carries a charge. It holds a memory. It has preferences. And it arranges the world around itself. A seed does the same with soil and water and light. One specific plant, whatever field you plant it in, you have not been choosing badly. That is the wrong frame entirely. Something in you has been choosing before you ever get there. And here is what almost nobody realizes about that something. It is not random, and it is not cruel. It is faithful. It is repeating one particular scene with extraordinary precision. The reason it does that goes much deeper than most people are ready to hear. For most of human history, this was not a psychological question. It was a religious one. When a woman acted against her own interest with strange consistency, nobody spoke of unresolved material. They said something had taken hold of her. They gave it a name. They gave it a face. They said a demon was riding her life. We hear that now and feel a little embarrassed for our ancestors. Jung did not. He wrote that the old language was clumsy but observant. Those people were describing something real, and they described it with the only words they had. What they had witnessed was autonomy. They had watched a person do, over and over, the very thing she did not want to do. They had heard a voice come out of her mouth that was not the voice she used. They had seen a reaction that was too large, too fast, and far too old for the small moment that provoked it. That is not superstition. That is accurate observation carried in a mythic vocabulary. Jung's contribution was to keep the observation and change the vocabulary. What earlier ages called a demon, he called a complex. And he was careful about what he meant by it. He did not mean a hang-up. He did not mean a sore subject. The word has been softened almost to nothing in ordinary speech. He meant a splinter of the psyche that has broken loose and begun to live on its own. It carries its own emotional charge. It keeps its own memories. It holds its own view of the world, formed on the day it broke off and unchanged ever since. And most importantly, it has its own will. Jung put this in a sentence people quote lightly and rarely feel. He said, "We do not have complexes. Complexes have us." The demon did not go anywhere when the word changed. It only moved from the church to the consulting room. And in a woman's life, it does most of its work in one specific place, not inside her thoughts, in the space between her and other people. Jung did not arrive at this idea through theory. He arrived at it holding a stopwatch. Early in his career, he ran a simple experiment. He read a list of ordinary words aloud to a patient. Mother, water, table, knife. The patient answered with the first word that came to mind. Most answers came back in under 2 seconds, but at certain words, something happened. The answer arrived late, or the woman laughed, or repeated the word back, or gave an answer that made no sense at all, then could not remember giving it. Something was interfering. Something was standing in the road. Jung mapped where the delays clustered and found they gathered around a single emotional theme. He had located a hidden structure simply by watching where the mind stumbled. He called it a feeling-toned group of ideas, a cluster of images and memories bound together by one strong emotion. At the center of that cluster sits a wound. Around the wound gather the memories that share its flavor. Around those gather the beliefs that justify them. Over years, this becomes something more than a memory. It becomes a small personality. It has an age, usually the age you were when it formed. It holds a fixed opinion about what people are like. It keeps a stance ready for the moment it recognizes its cue. And it does not report to you. That is the part worth sitting with. You can be 40 years old, thoughtful and self-aware, and still house a 5-year-old with absolute conviction and a great deal of power. Jung wrote that complexes appear in dreams as figures, people, animals, presences that speak and act with intent. He said they behave inside the psyche, the way separate beings behave in a room. They are not you, but they are not foreign either. They are pieces of you that were sent away and have been living without supervision ever since. And a piece of a woman living without supervision does not stay quiet. It looks for a way back in, and the way it chooses runs straight through other people. Nothing splits off without a reason. A complex forms at a moment the psyche cannot hold. Not always violence. Not always anything a stranger would recognize as harm. Very often it is smaller and quieter than that. A girl of 6 needs something and asks for it plainly. The room goes cold. The adult she asked turns away, or laughs, or explains carefully why the asking was selfish. Nothing dramatic happens. Nobody remembers it by dinner. But something in her cannot digest that moment. It is too much confusion for a mind that small. She needs the adult, so the adult cannot be wrong, which leaves only one place to put the fault, so the whole event is bundled together. The need, the shame, the cold room, the conclusion. All of it set aside, whole and sealed, with the feeling still burning inside. That bundle does not decay. This is the strange and important part. Ordinary memories soften with time. They lose their color. They get retold and reshaped until they fit the woman you became. Split-off material does none of that. It is preserved exactly because it was removed from the flow of living before it could be worked through. 20 years later, she is capable, respected, and calm. And a certain tone in someone's voice brings a 6-year-old to the front of the room. She will call this being sensitive. She will call it overreacting. She will apologize for it for the rest of her life. What is actually happening is far simpler. A sealed thing is being opened, and everything inside it is still at full strength. Jung said such a fragment carries its own energy, energy that was withdrawn from her conscious life on the day it split off. That energy has to go somewhere. It does not go inward and rest. Nothing in the psyche is that patient. It looks for a shape in the outer world that matches the shape it already knows. And when it finds one, it flows toward it with a force that has nothing to do with the person standing there. This is why the same figure keeps arriving in your life. You are not meeting them. You are finding them. Not every splinter begins with you. Some of them arrive already formed, handed across a generation, before you were old enough to have a story of your own. Watch how a family works, and you will see it. Your mother had a particular way of standing inside relationships. Perhaps she waited. Perhaps she managed everybody and asked for nothing. Perhaps she kept a private grievance that never once became a sentence. She learned it somewhere too. From her own mother, in another kitchen, in a harder decade than yours. Nobody taught it directly. Nobody sat a child down and explained the rules aloud. It travels by demonstration. A girl watches, 1,000 times over, what closeness looks like, what is permitted to be said, what must be swallowed and carried quietly. She learns which position is available to a woman in a room, and she takes it, not by choosing it, but by having no other shape in view. Jung wrote that the strongest influence on a child is often not what a parent does, but what a parent never lived. The unlived life of the mother presses on everyone standing nearby. The woman who abandoned her own ambition raises a daughter who cannot rest. The woman who never spoke her anger raises a daughter who speaks it constantly, or one who cannot speak it at all. You may be carrying the second half of somebody else's unfinished scene. This is not offered so the blame can move back one generation. Blame is exactly the wrong instrument here. It is offered because it explains a specific and confusing experience. Many women feel their pattern is older than their own life, that it does not fit the events they can actually remember, that the intensity has no biography. Very often, they are right. You are not only holding your own splinter, you are holding a position in an arrangement that was already running long before you arrived, and a position can be stepped out of, but only by a woman who knows she is standing in one. Think of what a magnet does to iron filings scattered across a page. Nothing in the filings decides anything. They do not choose. They arrange because a field is present, and a field organizes whatever falls inside it. A complex does the same thing with human material. It does not create people. It did not invent your last partner or the woman at work. Those are real human beings with lives of their own. What it does is arrange your relation to them. It decides what you notice first in a stranger. It decides which quality feels like depth and which feels like nothing at all. It decides who becomes interesting and who becomes background. None of this happens in words. It happens before words, in the first 30 seconds of a room. You meet 9 people at a gathering. 8 leave no trace on you. The 9th catches, not because she is better, but because something in her matches a shape you already carry. Perhaps she is warm in a slightly withholding way. Perhaps he listens with an unmistakable edge of judgment underneath the listening, and your attention rises, and you lean in. And later you will say there was chemistry between you. There was recognition. Jung was clear that a complex has this kind of pull. He described it as a center of force in the psyche, a gravity around which material gathers. What most people miss is how far that gravity reaches beyond the skin. It does not only gather thoughts, it gathers situations, it gathers people. It gathers whole years of a life. You have felt this happen. You have looked around a room full of decent, available human beings and felt absolutely nothing. Then one person walks in carrying a particular flavor of unavailability, and you are awake for the first time all evening. That is not desire. That is a splinter recognizing its other half, and the recognition is never conscious. By the time you have a thought about it, the choosing has already been done, which raises the only question that matters next. What wakes the field up? Jung borrowed a word from the night sky to describe it. He said a complex becomes constellated. Stars do not move when a constellation forms. What changes is that scattered points suddenly organize into one recognizable figure, and once you have seen the figure, you can never unsee it. That is what happens inside you. A situation arrives carrying the right ingredients, not the whole original scene, just enough of it. A tone, a pause, a certain kind of authority and a certain kind of voice, and instantly the entire cluster lights up at once. The old feeling, the old conclusion, the old readiness. You did not summon it. You did not decide to feel this. It assembled itself, complete, in less than a second. From the inside, being constellated feels like clarity. That is the trap. It does not feel like being taken over. It feels like finally seeing the truth about this person. It feels sharp and certain and morally justified. You feel more awake, not less. You feel that at last you understand what is really going on here. That certainty is the signature of the thing. Ordinary judgment is slower and far less sure of itself. A constellated complex arrives already convinced, and it brings its old strategy along with it, ready to use. If the strategy was appeasing, you have appeased before you have finished thinking. If it was attacking first, you are already cutting. If it was disappearing, you have gone quiet and pleasant and very far away. Afterward, you will wonder what happened to you. You will replay the whole scene and not find yourself anywhere in it. You were not absent. You were simply not in charge. Jung said the complex behaves like an independent being under these conditions. It uses your voice. It uses your face. It uses your history with the person in front of you as raw material. And it does not care in the slightest who that person actually is, which is precisely why the same fight can appear in relationships that have nothing else in common. Here is what makes no sense at all on the surface. If something hurt you, you should avoid it. That is what any animal does. Burn once, learn forever. Instead, you walk toward it, repeatedly, with a strange feeling of homecoming. Psychology has a name for this, the compulsion to repeat. Most people meet it as an inner idea. The same thoughts, the same habits, the same quiet self-defeat. But its most powerful form is not inward at all. Its most powerful form lives between people. Because the original wound did not happen inside you. It happened between you and someone else. It was relational when it was made, and it stays relational in what it demands. A split-off fragment is not looking for insight. It is looking for the scene. It needs the other chair filled. It needs a second person willing to play the part, so the moment can be run again from the start. And so it does something remarkable. It finds candidates. It auditions them. It rewards the ones who fit. You have watched this happen without knowing what you were watching. Someone kind and steady appears and you feel almost nothing. Someone with the exact flavor of your unfinished scene appears and your whole body says yes before you have spoken. You have called that instinct. You have trusted it as instinct for decades. Jung would say something ancient in you was recognizing its own material, and the fragment repeats not out of malice, but out of something much closer to hope. It is trying to reach a different ending. That is the part which redeems this entire picture, and we will come back to it. The tragedy is that the fragment cannot write a different ending, because it knows nothing new. It only knows the original scene. So it stages the same play and gets the same final act and concludes once more that the world is exactly what it always believed. And each time, it grows a little more certain than before, which means the pattern is not evidence about people. It is evidence about who has been doing the casting. Something usually arrives at this point in the thinking. Not a thought exactly, more like a name rising to the surface. A face. A particular year. A relationship you have explained 100 different ways and never once placed beside the others. Let it stay a moment without deciding what it means. Recognition works slowly. It does not arrive as a conclusion. It arrives as a small refusal to keep believing the old explanation. Nothing has to be resolved right now. You do not have to be fair to anyone. You do not have to reach a verdict about who was at fault, or defend anyone, or condemn anyone. What matters is only that the question has changed shape. It is no longer, why did they do that to me? It is, why does this keep finding me? That second question opens a very different door than the first one ever could. The first door leads back into the same corridor of names and grievances. The second leads somewhere nobody else can follow you. And everything that comes after depends on being willing to stand in front of it for a while without hurrying past. There is a way of looking at your own life that almost nobody uses. You are used to reading vertically, one relationship at a time, from beginning to end, each with its own story and its own reasons. Read that way, everything looks explainable. Every ending has a cause. Every cause lives inside another person. Now try reading horizontally instead. Lay the relationships side by side. Not in order of how much they mattered, in order of their shape. Your last 3 loves. The friendship that ended badly. The manager you could not be in a room with. The woman at work who took up all the air. Ignore the content. Ignore who was right. Look only at the geometry. Who stood above and who stood below. Who reached and who withdrew. What role you occupied by the 3rd month. What the final scene sounded like. Do this honestly and something appears that no single story could ever reveal. The signs that follow are that geometry, named. They are not about your inner life. There is another set of signs for that. The reaction that is far too large for its cause. The self-sabotage that arrives at the same threshold every time. The voice inside your own head using words that were never yours. These 7 are different. Every one of them lives outside you, in the space between you and other people. They are how a split-off fragment organizes an entire social world around itself. Read them without deciding in advance that you are guilty of them. This is not a moral examination. Nothing here means you are broken or difficult or bad at love. It means something in you has been doing a great deal of arranging, and you have been giving credit for all that arrangement to fate and to chance, and to a long parade of people who were only standing nearby at the time. The first sign is the one you have already half seen and explained away more times than you can count. You keep meeting the same person. They do not look alike. That is what has kept this hidden from you for so long. One was loud, one was quiet, one had money, one had none. One was 20 years older. One lived on the other side of the world. By every visible measure, they had nothing whatsoever in common. But stand back and describe them by what they did to you, and the differences fall away entirely. Each one was warm at the start and cooled in a way you could never quite name. Each one made you work for the same small portion of approval. Each one had a moment of going cold, after which you found yourself explaining yourself. The costume changed. The function did not. This is the clearest fingerprint of an active complex in relational life. It selects by function, never by appearance. And it is remarkably good at the work. It can find the one withholding person at a party of 60. It can locate, across an entire company, the single manager who carries your father's particular silence. You will call that a coincidence for years. Now notice the contexts. This is what makes the sign undeniable. If it happened only in love, you could blame love. If it happened only at work, you could blame the industry. But it appears in love and at work and in friendship and in some volunteer group you joined for 3 months. Different worlds, different rules, different populations entirely, and the same figure walks in. No environment explains that. There is only one element present in every one of those rooms. You will be tempted to conclude that people are simply like this. That everyone turns out this way once you know them well enough. Watch the people around you before you accept that. Watch how differently their lives are shaped. Your sister does not meet this person. Your colleague has never once had this conversation. The figure is not the world. The figure is yours. You do not only attract the same person, you become the same person. Join a new group and watch what happens over the first weeks. Nobody assigns anything. There is no vote. And yet by the 2nd month, you hold a position, and it is the position you always hold. Perhaps you are the one who fixes things. People bring you their situations. You leave every gathering knowing everyone and being known by nobody. Perhaps you are the one who ends up carrying the blame. The mood turns, and somehow it points at you. It has happened in 3 unrelated groups, and each time the story was completely different. Perhaps you are the one called too much, too intense, too honest, too demanding. You have heard the same complaint from people who never met each other. Or you are the quiet one, and nobody has any idea what you actually think, and you cannot remember choosing that either. The role arrives faster than the relationships do. That is the tell. Jung would say the complex does not only project outward, it also arranges you. It moves you into the position the original scene requires, because the scene cannot be replayed with the parts left empty. If the old room needed a small girl managing an adult's moods, you will manage moods at work. Nobody asked you to. If the old room needed someone to carry the family's disowned trouble, you will keep finding yourself holding trouble that was never yours. The role feels like your personality. That is why it is so difficult to see. It does not feel like a part you are playing. It feels like simply who you are, showing up in a new place. But personality does not settle into place in 6 weeks flat, in a room full of strangers, in the identical configuration every time. That is not character. That is casting. And once you have taken the part, everyone else has to take theirs. There is a category of person who takes something from you the moment they appear. Not everyone. Not most people. One very specific kind. Perhaps it is a certain sort of woman. Composed. Effortless. Faintly amused by everything around her. She has not said a single word to you, and already you are smaller. Perhaps it is a certain kind of authority, not cruelty. Something colder than cruelty. The mild, reasonable man who never raises his voice and always knows better. Perhaps it is the woman who seems to need nothing from anyone, or the man whose approval sits permanently just out of reach. And the size of your reaction surprises even you. You have argued with yourself about it. You know she has done nothing. You know he is entitled to his opinion. You can say all of that clearly to yourself while your body prepares for something else entirely. The intensity does not match the evidence, and you notice that it does not match, and noticing changes nothing. That gap is the sign. Wherever reaction outruns cause, something old is being touched. Jung described this as the moment the complex is struck. He compared it to a nerve. Everything can be discussed calmly until one particular subject arrives, and then the whole system responds at once. The category is not random. It is a portrait. Whoever wounded the original moment lives inside that category, not the specific person. The type. The essential quality that made them unbearable. Some part of you holds a template of that quality, and it searches every room for a match. When it finds one, it does not tell you what it found. It simply floods you. And then, because you are a thinking woman, you build a reason afterward. She is arrogant. He is condescending. That family is cold. Sometimes the reason is even true. But it is a description written after the fact. The reaction came first. The explanation came running to catch up with it. Some couples have one fight for 30 years. So do you, and you have had it with different people. Not the same subject. The subjects change constantly. Money, time, attention, a tone of voice at a birthday dinner. The structure never changes. It opens the same way. It escalates at the same step. There is a sentence you always say, and you have said it to people who never met one another. There is a moment where you go silent, or where you say the thing you cannot take back, or where you begin listing evidence like a lawyer. And there is an ending that always feels the same, whatever the words were. Try something uncomfortable. Write down what you actually said in the last serious argument you had. Then write what you said in the worst fight of the relationship before that one. Most women who do this find the same phrases waiting on both pages. Not similar phrases, the same ones. Because the argument is not being generated by the present situation at all. It is an old recording playing, and the current partner is only the surface it plays against. That is why this fight never resolves. Resolution requires both people to be present in the room, but you are not entirely present. Part of you is in another house, in another decade, saying this to somebody else. And they can feel it. They can feel that the size of your response belongs somewhere else. Some of them will say so directly. You are not fighting with me right now. They are often correct. That is the hardest part to accept. The words survive the change of partner. The volume survives it. The choreography survives it, step for step. Only the person receiving it changes. And if the same play runs with 4 different actors, the play is not coming from the actors. Look at your closest relationship and describe the emotional climate inside it, not the person. The weather between you. Is there a low current of waiting? Is there someone whose mood everyone else quietly adjusts around? Is there a silence with rules attached to it? Now describe the house you grew up in, using those same words. Many women discover they have carefully rebuilt the room they most wanted to escape. Not the house, not the furniture, not even the same kind of person, The dynamic. If love arrived unpredictably and had to be earned, you may have chosen a partner whose warmth comes and goes and called that uncertainty passion. If your safety depended on managing someone else's temper, you may find yourself managing again and calling it being supportive. If you were the responsible child in a house of chaos, you may have built a life full of people who need saving and called it your nature. The reconstruction is precise. That is the eerie part. It is not a rough echo. It reproduces the exact emotional position you occupied, often down to details you never noticed choosing. And you did not do this out of nostalgia. Nobody longs for the room that hurt them. You did it because that room is the only place your split-off fragment knows how to live. It holds one map of what closeness feels like. That map was drawn before you could read. So when a relationship begins to feel like the map, something in you settles. It reads as depth. It reads as real love. And when a relationship does not feel like the map, when someone is simply steady and warm and available, something in you calls it boring. You may have left a good person for exactly that reason and never once understood why you did it. That was not preference. That was the fragment refusing an unfamiliar room. Someone's life is falling apart, and you are already moving toward it, not out of duty, out of something considerably stronger than duty. You cancel things. You lose sleep. You take on practical work that nobody asked you to take. You think about their situation while you are brushing your teeth. And if you try to stay out of it, you cannot rest. That is the part worth examining, not the helping. The impossibility of not helping. Genuine care has edges. It can say no on a Tuesday and still be care. This has no edges at all. This is a pull. The people who need rescuing find you quickly in every new setting. They find you before you have learned anybody's name. Somewhere in the first conversation, they say something with weight in it, and you lean in. The arrangement is made without either of you noticing. Jung would say the fragment has found its scene again, and this time you are holding the powerful role. Because rescuing is not only generosity, it is also position. The one who is needed cannot be left. The one who holds everything cannot be dismissed. There is a kind of safety in being indispensable, and the fragment learned that very early. There is something else too, and it deserves to be said plainly. Other people's crises are a place to put your own. While you are inside their emergency, you are not inside your own life. Their pain is loud enough to cover yours, and it carries the enormous advantage of being solvable. You come home hollow and call it exhaustion from caring too much. But notice who you never rescue. Notice how rarely you allow anyone to do any of this for you. The traffic runs one way. It has always run one way. And a current that only ever runs one way is never really about the person at the other end. The last sign is the one that finally breaks the argument that any of this is bad luck. The same specific injury keeps arriving from people who have nothing in common. Not general disappointment, a precise one. Perhaps it is always the moment you needed them most, and they were not there. Perhaps it is always being quietly replaced by someone else. Perhaps it is always the private thing you shared being used against you later. Perhaps it is always the same sentence at the end. I did not know you felt that way. And the people who deliver it are unlike each other in every way you could measure. Different ages, different values, different loyalties. Some of them were genuinely good people. That is the detail that will not let you rest. If they had all been the same kind of person, you could blame your judgment. If they had all come from one part of your life, you could blame that world. Instead, the wound stays constant while the hands keep changing. So consider the possibility that you are not only receiving this, you are helping to build the conditions for it, not deliberately. Never deliberately. But if you never state a need until it has become unbearable, people will fail to meet it, and every failure will feel like proof. If you test people quietly, they will eventually fail the test, because the test was designed to be failed. If you give everything at the beginning, you will be resented at the end, and that resentment will look exactly like betrayal. The fragment is not a passive victim here. It sets the stage. And when the expected ending finally arrives, notice that you are not entirely devastated. Underneath the pain, there is something almost like relief, because it was right, again. And being right about the world is the only thing it has instead of comfort. 7 signs, 1 source. They look like 7 separate problems, attracting the same difficult person. falling into the same role. The reaction that outruns its cause. The argument that repeats itself. The rebuilt childhood house. The pull toward every fire. The wound that keeps arriving from new hands. You could spend a decade working on them one at a time and get nowhere. You would fix the argument and find the role waiting. You would leave the difficult partner and find a crisis to manage instead. Because they are not 7 things. They are 7 views of one thing, seen from different angles. And this is the moment the whole picture can either close or open. It closes if you use these signs as evidence against yourself. Many women do exactly that. They read something like this and reach a verdict, that they are the problem, that they ruin everything, that the fault was always theirs alone. That conclusion feels like insight. It is not. It is the complex, working with new material. Notice what just happened there. The instant you had a clearer view of your own life, something turned it into an accusation. That is the fingerprint again. Not the content, the speed and the certainty. The picture opens differently. It opens when you stop asking what is wrong with you and start asking what is running. Because something is running. Something with a shape, a history, and a purpose it has never once been able to explain. You have now seen its work. You have seen where it stands in your relationships and what it builds there. What you have not yet seen is how it does this. How a piece of your own psyche reaches out into a room and arranges other human beings. That is not mysticism. It is a specific process, and Jung described it with unusual precision. And once you understand the process, the whole thing becomes something you can meet. Projection is the oldest word in this part of the work, and the most misunderstood. People use it to mean invention. She is projecting usually means she made it up. Jung meant something far more exact and much more interesting. He said projection is not a lie you tell about someone. It is an image inside you that lands on someone, and it needs a place to land. He called that place the hook. You cannot hang a coat on a flat wall. You need something protruding. Some small, real feature that the coat can catch on. So the person you have cast is never a blank surface. There is always something genuinely there. He really is a little distant. She really is somewhat competitive. That is the hook. But the coat you hang on it is enormous. The coat has a history. The coat is heavy with a feeling that began long before you ever met him. And once the coat is on the hook, you cannot see the hook anymore. You only see the coat. This is why arguing about facts never helps here. You are not wrong about the small thing. You are wrong about its size. 2 things follow from this, and both of them matter. First, the complex needs suitable people. It cannot use just anybody. It requires a person with the right small protrusion, which is why your choosing has always been so selective and so consistent. Second, the other person feels the weight of it. That is the part almost everyone misses. Projection is not silent. It presses on people. Something in them is being addressed that is not actually them. Some feel it as pressure. Some feel it as an expectation they can never meet. Some, quietly and without deciding to, begin growing into it, which is how a projection slowly becomes a prophecy. Jung noticed something in his patients that still unsettles people who hear it. Nobody meets another human being cleanly. Between you and every person stands an inner image, formed long ago, and the living person has to be seen straight through it. For a woman, Jung gave one of these images a name. He called it the animus, an inner masculine figure built partly from her father, partly from the men of her childhood, partly from something far older and widely shared. Whatever we make of his terminology, the observation holds firm. You carry an inner partner. You carry an inner authority. You carry an inner critic with a very particular voice and a very particular tone. These are not opinions you hold. They are figures. They have faces and moods and habits of speech. And when a real man walks into the room, the inner figure moves first. That is why a first impression can feel so total and turn out so wrong. You were not perceiving him. You were matching him against a portrait you have carried since before you could read. If the portrait is cold, ordinary warmth will look like weakness. If the portrait judges, an ordinary remark will arrive as a verdict. The same thing happens with women. There is an inner mother. There is an inner rival. There is an inner example of what a woman is permitted to be. Meet a woman who resembles that portrait and you will not meet her at all. You will meet the portrait standing exactly where she is. Notice what happens when someone refuses the part. You feel a small disorientation. Something in you insists on the old reading and begins hunting for evidence to support it. Jung said these inner figures stay projected outward until they are recognized as inner, which means the work is not to find better people. The work is to notice who you have been casting them as. Because the figure will keep finding an actor. It has never once had trouble finding one. And the actor will always be a real person, with a real life, standing inside a story that began without them. A field does not only pull, it also shapes. The complex works on your relationships through 3 quiet operations, and not one of them feels like a decision. The first is attention. Out of everything happening in a room, you register only a fraction. The fragment decides much of that fraction. It notices the flicker of impatience on one face and misses the open warmth on 3 others. You are not seeing the room. You are seeing the parts of the room that confirm the map. The second is tolerance. Every relationship has early moments where a line is either drawn or it is not. A small dismissal, a promise quietly broken, a joke made at your expense. What you let pass in the first month decides the shape of the next 3 years. And the fragment sets that threshold without consulting you. If the original scene taught you that this is simply what closeness costs, you will not even register the moment as a choice. You will register nothing at all. The third is invitation. This one is the subtlest. You give off signals about how you expect to be treated, and people answer them. Not because they are cruel, because human beings read position very quickly, and most of them take the part they are handed. Apologize for taking up space, and you teach a room how much space you get. Handle everything without ever asking for help, and people will stop offering it. None of this is your fault. All of it is your material. Attention, tolerance, invitation. 3 levers moved from underneath in the opening weeks of every relationship you have ever had. By the time you consciously assess anything at all, the architecture is already standing. You are not living in the world. You are living inside the room your fragment has been building since you were small. There is a reason other people fall so neatly into their parts. A scene needs 2 positions. If you consistently occupy one of them, you are constantly signaling for the other. Stand as the woman who gives without asking, and you generate takers, including from people who are not takers anywhere else in their lives. Stand as the one who must be handled carefully, and people begin handling you, and their careful handling becomes the distance you complain about. Jung had a term for this kind of blurring between 2 people. He called it an unconscious identity, a state in which it is genuinely unclear where one psyche ends and the other begins. In that state, feelings travel. You have felt this happen. You have walked into a room calm and walked out carrying an anger that was not yours when you arrived. And the reverse is equally true. Something you are not aware of carrying can surface in the other person and be lived out by them instead. The withheld anger you would never express arrives as their outburst. The neediness you refuse in yourself appears in the partner who cannot be alone for an evening. This is why some women say they become someone else in certain relationships. They are not imagining it. 2 split-off parts have found each other, and the pair has become a system with behavior of its own. That system is far stronger than either person's good intentions. It is why you can promise yourself, in complete sincerity, that this time will be different. And then watch yourself do the familiar thing inside a month. The promise was made by you. The behavior is being generated by something much older than the promise. And no amount of resolve wins that contest, because resolve is a conscious tool, and this is happening well below the level resolve can reach. Consider the moment people call chemistry. You meet someone, and there is a click. It feels ancient. It feels like being known without any need for explanation. You have almost certainly built entire years of your life on that feeling. It deserves a much closer look. Genuine compatibility does not usually announce itself that way. It builds. It reveals itself slowly through how someone behaves across months and small, ordinary situations. The instant, overwhelming click is a different phenomenon altogether. It is a match between what you carry and what they carry. 2 unfinished scenes have found each other, and both people feel a rush of relief. The woman who learned that love must be earned meets the man who withholds it, and neither of them can explain the intensity. Of course they cannot. It is not about the present at all. Each has found somebody who fits the empty position perfectly. This is why the beginning is so powerful and why the middle is so painful. The beginning is recognition. The middle is the scene running toward its known ending. Notice that the feeling of home is not proof of health. It is only proof of familiarity. If the room you came from was a difficult room, then home will feel like difficulty, and safety will feel like nothing at all. Jung wrote that people are bound together far more by what is unconscious in them than by anything they consciously share. That binding is enormously strong. It is also completely blind, and it explains something many women have observed with confusion. The relationships hardest to leave are almost never the best ones. Difficulty is not what makes a bond deep. Unfinished business is what makes a bond hard to break. Now, the question that changes everything. Why does it keep doing this? The obvious answer is that it is broken and simply repeats itself. That answer is available, and it is bleak, and Jung did not accept it. He was unusual among the psychologists of his time in this respect. He insisted that events in the psyche have an aim, not only a cause. The question is not only what made this. The question is, what is this trying to do? And the answer is stranger and kinder than anyone expects. The fragment is trying to be seen. It cannot speak. It has no access to your language. It formed before you had words to hold it, and it has no way to tell you what happened, so it does the only thing it can do. It shows you. It builds the scene, out in the world, in full color, with living people, over and over, hoping that this time you will finally look. Every repetition is a message that has not yet been received, and it will not stop, because from where it stands, nothing has changed. The message is still undelivered. Nobody has come. This reframes every one of the 7 signs. The difficult person you keep meeting is not a punishment. It is a signpost. The role you always take is not proof of weakness. It is the exact position where the original wound lives. The argument you keep having is not a failing. It is a sentence that was never finished, spoken again in the hope of a different ending. Jung wrote that whatever is not made conscious will meet you from outside, and you will call it fate. Read that carefully. It is not a curse laid on you. It is a description of how something works, and anything that works a certain way can be interrupted. Because the moment the message finally reaches you, the messenger no longer has to shout. The old word was demon, and the old word frightened people for good reason. Something acts through you against your will. Something knows your life better than you do. Something arranges other people around you while you sleep. That is genuinely unnerving, and pretending otherwise helps nobody. But there was a second half to the old picture, and it got lost along the way. In many of the older traditions, the spirit that troubled a person was not simply evil. It was exiled. It was something that had belonged and been cast out, and it made trouble because it wanted back in. Jung understood the psyche in exactly this way. The complex is not an invader. Nothing foreign ever entered you. It is your own material. It is a piece of your own life force that was sent away at a moment when keeping it felt too dangerous to survive, and it took something with it when it went. This is the part almost nobody expects. A split-off fragment does not only hold pain, it also holds capacity. The girl who stopped asking did not only lose her voice, she lost the whole living function of desire. The direct, unashamed knowledge of what she wants. That did not vanish from the world. It left with the fragment. Which means everything you have been avoiding is standing guard over something you have needed for 30 years. The woman who cannot bear a certain kind of composed, effortless woman is often standing directly beside her own unlived ease. The woman who cannot stop rescuing has an enormous capacity for devotion, and almost none of it has ever been turned toward herself. The demon is holding your inheritance. It has been trying to hand it back in the clumsiest way imaginable, by dragging you into the same room again and again, until you finally turn around and look at what has been standing behind you. Something happens to a woman when she finally sees the whole shape of it, not in the moment of recognition. That part usually stings. In the moment just after. Because the first feeling is almost always grief. Years become visible all at once. Relationships that did not need to be lost. Time spent proving something to people who were never the judge. Let that grief have its hour. It is honest, and it is the price of sight. But underneath it, something else begins moving. For your entire adult life, you have believed there was something wrong with you at the root. That belief has been the quiet floor beneath everything else, and it turns out the floor was a misreading. You were not broken. You were faithful. Some part of you has been holding an old scene with absolute loyalty, waiting for someone to come back and finish it properly. That is not a defect. That is the same devotion you have given to everyone else, turned inward and left in the dark for decades. Think about what that means regarding your capacity to love. It never went anywhere. It was simply committed elsewhere, to a room that no longer exists. And nothing about you needs to be destroyed for this to change. You do not have to become a different woman. You do not have to cut anything out of yourself. You are not being asked to kill the demon. You are being asked to let it back into the house. That is the whole turn, and it is smaller and quieter than anyone expects it to be. The exile does not end through a war. It ends through an introduction. And once that has happened, the pull does not disappear overnight. But it stops being invisible. And whatever you can see, you are no longer entirely inside. Everything now turns on a single distinction. There is a difference between being inside something and standing beside it. While a complex is running you, there is no space at all. You are the anger. You are the certainty. You are the woman who has to fix this immediately. Consciousness here is nothing more mysterious than the appearance of a small gap. You still feel the pull. That has to be said clearly, because false promises do real harm in this territory. The feeling does not go away. The old rush still arrives when the familiar figure walks into the room. But now something else is present alongside it. A quiet observation. There it is. 3 words, and the entire situation is different. Not because the pull has weakened, but because you are no longer the only thing in the room. There is the pull, and there is you, and those are now 2 different things. Jung was honest about the limits here. He never claimed a complex can be removed. He said it cannot be abolished, but it can be robbed of its autonomy, stripped of its power to act without you. That is the realistic goal, and it is more than enough. You are not aiming to never feel this again. You are aiming for the half second between the feeling and the action. Inside that half second, everything you actually want becomes possible. What follows now is not advice about relationships. None of it is about better communication or choosing partners more wisely. It is inner work, and it happens in the narrow space between the pull and the response. The question is no longer whether the pattern will return. It will. The question is who will be standing there when it does. The first practice is an act of seeing, and it has to be done on paper. Not in your head. In your head, the stories stay separate, and that separation is exactly what protects the pattern. Take a page and list every significant relationship of your adult life. Loves, close friendships, the people at work who occupied real space inside you. Aim for at least 10. With fewer than that, coincidence remains believable. Now, for each one, answer 4 questions in a few words. No stories. No context, no defending anybody. What role did I occupy? What did I want from them that I never said? What was the moment it turned? How did it end? Write the answers in a column so they sit directly beside each other. Then read down the columns instead of across the rows. This is where it becomes undeniable. The stories were all different. The columns will not be. Most women find their entire relational life described by 3 or 4 repeated words. Keep going. Now do the harder part. Find the earliest version. Somewhere behind those 10, there is a first one. Not always a parent, though often. Sometimes a sibling. Sometimes one teacher, 1 year, one friendship at 11 years old. You will know when you reach it, because the feeling in your body will change. Give the pattern a name when you find it. 2 or 3 words of your own choosing. Something plain enough that you would recognize it in the middle of an argument. The naming is not decoration. A thing with a name can be spoken about. A thing with a name can be seen coming from a distance. And this pattern has survived for decades on one thing only. It has never once been named out loud. The second practice happens in real time, and it uses the body rather than the mind. Every complex has a physical signature, and yours is remarkably consistent. Before the thought arrives, something moves. A tightening under the breastbone, heat rising in the face, a drop in the stomach, a sudden coldness accompanied by tremendous clarity. You have felt it 1,000 times and never once cataloged it. Catalog it now. The next 3 times you are pulled, stop and describe the sensation in plain language. The moment you cannot let a message go. The moment someone's tone lands too hard. Where is it? What temperature is it? Does it push outward or pull inward? Within a few weeks, you will have a reliable signature. And a signature is an early warning, because the physical response is faster than the story. It arrives first. The reason arrives afterward, dressed as a judgment about the person in front of you. Once you know your signature, you gain access to the half second. The practice inside that half second is not to argue with yourself. Arguing is useless. The fragment is entirely convinced and will win that argument every time. Do something simpler instead. Ask one question, silently. How old does this feel? Not how old am I? How old does this feel? The answer usually arrives fast, and it is almost never your actual age. 7, 11, 14. That number is the whole practice, because a woman who knows she is currently 11 years old has already stopped being entirely 11. You may still say the familiar sentence. You may still send the message you will regret, but you will know what is speaking. And knowing, repeated across months, is what slowly reduces its authority. The third practice is the one that sounds strange and works best. You speak to it. Jung called this active imagination, and it was central to his own life, not a technique he invented for other people. The principle is simple. A split-off part cannot be reasoned with from outside, but it can be addressed directly. Sit somewhere quiet, with a pen, at a time when the pattern has recently been active, not while you are inside it. Afterward, when the water has settled. Write a question on the page, directed at the part of you that keeps doing this. What are you afraid will happen if you stop? Then wait. Do not compose an answer. Let one come. Write down whatever arrives, even if it is one blunt sentence, even if it sounds nothing like you. Especially if it sounds nothing like you. Most women find a voice that is younger, simpler, and far more frightened than their adult self. It says things like this: if I stop watching, it happens again. Or this: if I need anything, they leave. That is the fragment speaking in its own words for the first time in 30 years. Do not correct it. Do not lecture it. It has already heard every reasonable argument, and it has never once been listened to. Ask what it wanted back then. Ask what it has been trying to show you all this time. Keep the pages. Come back every week or so. What you are building is a relationship with something that has never had one. And this is the actual remedy. Not removal. Relationship. A part of you that is spoken with no longer has to shout through your whole life in order to be heard. The fourth practice carries all of this into the room where it actually matters. When the pull arrives towards someone, you now have a specific task. Separate the small, real thing from the enormous old thing. Ask what is genuinely true of this person in this hour that any observer would also see. He did not answer for 2 days. That is the real size of it. Everything past that point, the certainty about what it means, the whole future you can already picture, belongs to the coat and not the hook. This is slow work, and it feels wrong at first, because the coat is always far more convincing than the hook. Do it anyway. Say the small, true thing to yourself in plain words. Then notice how much feeling is left over. The leftover is yours. It has been yours for decades. There is a second half to this practice, and it is the harder one. Stop blaming the instance. Every time the pattern completes, there is a person to hold responsible, and often they have genuinely earned part of it. But if you spend all your energy on this particular person, something else happens. You finish the work of that one relationship and walk straight into another, unchanged. The pattern survives on individual verdicts. Each verdict keeps the story local. So when an ending comes, ask a different question. Not who was wrong. Ask which position I took, how early I took it, and what I never said out loud. That question is unpleasant, and it is the only one that generalizes. None of this is easy. It asks you to hold responsibility without shame, and most people can manage only one of those at a time. But this is the point where the pull stops being the whole story, and the woman standing beside it finally gets a say. The final practice belongs to whatever begins next, because the arrangement is always made early. By the time a relationship feels serious, its shape has usually been decided. So the watch happens in the first month, when almost nothing has happened yet and everything is still soft. 3 things to hold lightly through those weeks. Watch your attention. When you meet someone, notice what you noticed first. Was it their warmth or the small flicker of coolness you have already begun trying to solve? If your interest rises at the precise moment somebody becomes slightly unavailable, mark it. Do not act on it. Simply mark it. Watch your tolerance. Somewhere in those first weeks, something small will happen that you would not accept from anybody else. A plan broken without an apology. A remark that lands wrong. A silence that follows something true you said. Ordinarily, you would let it pass and never think of it again. This time, say the plain sentence. That did not sit well with me. Not as an accusation, as information. The response you get is the most useful thing you will learn all month. Watch your invitation. Notice how quickly you slide into the familiar position. If you are already managing their moods by the second week, you have been cast, and you did the casting yourself. Step out of it early, while it is still light. The role is easy to decline in week 3 and nearly impossible to decline in year 3. None of this requires suspicion. You are not interrogating anyone, and you are not building a case. You are simply refusing to hand out the old parts before you know who is actually standing in front of you, and a scene that never gets cast cannot be performed. What actually changes if you do this work for a year? Be careful with the promises here. The change is real, and it is not the change most people imagine. The pull still arrives. The familiar figure still walks into the room, and something in you still turns over. What changes is what happens next. You notice the turn. You feel the old certainty rising, and you do not immediately act from it. There is a small distance now, and inside that distance you have options you never had before. You begin declining scenes, quietly, without announcement. Someone offers you the role you always take, and you feel the shape of the offer, and you simply do not step in. Some relationships end at that point, and the endings are far calmer than the old ones. Some change completely. A few people are visibly relieved. You will also notice something strange. Certain people stop appearing altogether, not because you are avoiding them, because a signal has changed, and they are no longer receiving what they used to answer. That is the strangest and most convincing evidence that none of this was ever chance. New people begin to register. Someone steady and warm no longer reads as boring. That is not a small development. That is a fundamental change in what your inner world is willing to call real. And the old grief returns sometimes without warning. That is normal. Something in you lived in that room for a very long time. But the room is no longer the whole house. You will still meet the difficult person. You will simply meet them as a person, rather than as the next performance of the only story you knew. Return to the beginning. A room you had never entered. A person you had never met. And that strange certainty that you already knew them. The certainty was accurate. You were not wrong. You simply misread what you were recognizing. You thought you were recognizing them. You were recognizing yourself. A piece of yourself, standing out there in the world, wearing somebody else's face. That is what those older ages were pointing at with their frightening word. Something not entirely yours, moving through your life, quietly arranging what came next. They were not wrong about the phenomenon. They were only wrong about where it came from and what it wanted. It came from inside, and what it wanted was never to ruin you. It wanted to be found. For years you have looked at the people. You have studied them, blamed them, forgiven them, left them, and understood them better than they understood themselves. None of that was wasted. It made you perceptive. It made you kind in ways that cost you something. But the people were never the text. They were only the paper it was written on. And now you can read it. There is nothing here to defeat. There is no exorcism to perform. There is a piece of a woman's own life that was set outside a very long time ago. It has been knocking at every door she has in the only way it knows. You do not have to be afraid of what has been knocking. You were never haunted by a stranger. The work does not end here. It continues quietly, in ordinary rooms, in the seconds before you answer somebody. There will be a night when the old figure appears again, and something in you leans forward exactly the way it always has. That is not failure. That is the material arriving for the next round of the work, and you will have something now that you did not have before. A name for it, a signature in the body, a question about how old this feels, a page you can write on afterward. That is what changes a life. Not one great revelation, but 100 small moments of noticing spread across years. None of it requires you to become somebody else. It only requires you to stop mistaking the messenger for the message. The pattern was never a sentence passed on you. It was a message, delivered the only way it could be, through whoever happened to be standing nearby. You were never possessed by something that hated you. You were being followed by the part of yourself that refused to be left behind.